That was an interesting interview with Professor Glenn Altshuler, Brooklyn native from Cornell University, who has plenty of interesting anecdotes and stories about growing up and living in Brooklyn and collecting baseball cards, obviously. But we have another Brooklyn native on the show today. It's actor Tony Lo Bianco, who I've interviewed before when he did a really fantastic play, which he also directed and co-wrote, called Little Flower, The Life of Fiorello La Guardia. Welcome, Tony. How are you?
Rob, it's a real pleasure, and it's wonderful to hear that you had someone from Brooklyn on before me, and he might have his cards as I do. Us Brooklynites, we hang on to things, and because not only the memories that are so fantastic in Brooklyn, but also the memorabilia. I also have my baseball cards and all of my marbles.
You're going to want to kill this guy. He's a Cornell professor, and his big thing, his ongoing anecdote is that he threw all of his baseball cards out the window when they were moving from one part of Brooklyn to the other. I know.
I still have them, and I have. As a matter of fact, I'm sitting here and I'm looking at the marbles that I have in a big jar as a remembrance of and it's the marbles I won, as a kid. Flicking them and throwing them, not throwing them, but with you put them on your finger, nail your thumb, and you thumb them. I don't know how to even explain that. And you win marbles, and I have a whole big jar full, and all my baseball cards as well too, and the G-Man cards and the World War II cards and boxing cards. Yeah, growing up in Brooklyn was a tremendous importance in my life because we came from the streets.
What part of Brooklyn were you born in?
Well, I was born in 39th Street and 3rd Avenue, between 3rd and 4th Avenue, near Sunset Park, and we moved around. We moved around 3 times before I landed in 18th Avenue and 49th Street, before I was 10 years old. So I moved from 39th Street to 56th Street and 5th Avenue to, and that's all Brooklyn, 49th Street and 7th Avenue, and then 18th Avenue and 49th Street. That's all before I was 10 years old. So I had a real taste of different cultures, different lifestyles, and of course, the war, World War II, was finishing up, and
you were born in 1936.
36. So as I moved along, and we were conscious of having, Mayor Fiorello La Guardia. I wasn't too conscious because even though he was mayor from 1934 to 1945, and I was growing up in that time, I wasn't aware of him, of course, as a kid, but my father was. And when he passed, I remember my father saying to me, he was sad, and I said, "What's the matter, Dad?" And he said, "A very good man died today." And how ironic that many years later I get to play the life of Mayor Fiorello La Guardia in my one-man show, The Little Flower. The Little Flower, was his nickname, Fiorello being flower. So, and he was a magnificent mayor and a real carer of the people, and he took care of them. And it's one thing that I do this. I've been doing this play, as you know, for a number of years, and I take it around not only our country, but I did it in Russia, and the American ambassador who attended the performance said to me, "You have done more for our country in these 2 hours than I have done in 2 years." The Russian people really, really related to the freedom and a care of a man for and of the people. And they were tremendously. I thought after I finished it was an opera. The kind of applause and the kind of a sustaining applause, and the amount of flowers they brought up. I had to walk up stage twice. The amount of flowers, to greet these wonderful, wonderful people. And the people said to me privately, "Please don't judge us from our government." He said to me, "Under this shirt beats a heart." It's a beautiful thing. That the people, just like some of the stuff we're going through in a way, there's such divisiveness in our country, and and Egypt, as a matter of fact, Egypt has to know that they have friends in America. It's not the government that is making that relationship happen. It's the people who really understand what's going on. But let me get back to Brooklyn.
Yeah, well, here's something you just reminded me about Fiorello La Guardia. Is I'm 60, but I remember my father grew up he was born in Brooklyn. He lived in the Bronx and ultimately Staten Island, where I was born. But he used to show me, I don't even know where it was broadcast because we only had 3 TV stations or when I was growing up. But there was always footage of LaGuardia reading the comics, or as my father called them, the funny papers.
Yes.
What was that? I mean, was that contrived, or is that a real thing that he liked to do as a man of the people?
No, what it was, you see, he loved children, just absolutely loved children, and took care of their parents and took care of the children. He was always concerned about the future, you see. And when the newspaper strike hit, he then read the comics to the children over radio because there was a newspaper strike. You see, he didn't want to disappoint the children. And the beautiful thing about LaGuardia and what attracts me to him is the moral aspect of those comics. He would read these comics with the good guy and the bad guy, and then say, and then at the end, and what is the meaning of all this? He'd say, dirty money never brings any luck. No, dirty money only brings sadness and sorrow and misery and disgrace.
I'm sorry.
All my children, I say patience and fortitude.
Did LaGuardia take a pay cut at some point?
He cut his salary in half as mayor. As soon as he became mayor, he was an extraordinary human being and lived by example.
Well, when I saw the show, another thing that I loved about this, I was telling some folks before we started in the engineer's booth that it was done at a really fantastic theater in a Baptist church. You don't even think of New York City as having Baptist church, in this grand old church in the basement, and it's like a little opera house there. It was a fantastic space, but you really created an environment, and the set was a beautiful little set, which, if I can remember, it was like LaGuardia's office.
That's right.
And
that's where
you felt like you were kind of sitting with the mayor, having a little audience at his office. Was Gracie Mansion built back then?
Yes, it was, but he didn't inhabit it right away. Slowly he went into it, but very reluctantly. He was a man of and for the people. There is a section that pertains to what's going on today. He said when he became mayor, he said, let me tell you something. If I don't live up to my campaign promises, I want you to throw me the hell out of office. Now, every candidate should say that to the people.
Well, even since we're not a particularly political show, I will say that we'd have to throw everybody out of office. But I have another question for you, just relating to Brooklyn and another Brooklynite, because I'm looking at your incredible resume. Arthur Miller, who wrote an amazing play called The View from the Bridge, and you were in that in 1983. I mean, you've had a really storied career. Before I even get to that, how did you... First, as an Italian American, were your parents born in Italy or in the United States?
No, both were born in the United States.
Okay,
my grandparents obviously were both born in Italy on both sides. But as far as A View from the Bridge is concerned, when I went to acting school when I was 18 years old from high school, just turning 18, we had a visit from Arthur Miller at the school.
Which school was this?
It was the Dramatic Workshop, which was on Broadway, about 50th Street, right across from the Winter Garden. There was a movie theater there called the Capitol Theater, and our school was upstairs in that building. And that's a school where Marlon Brando and a few other people went, Rod Steiger and what have you, and they went before me. But it was a school where when Arthur Miller came and visited to talk to us, which, by the way, it's something that I do now. I go to schools, colleges, what have you, and I talk to the students. And it always stuck in my mind that of what knowledge someone of some fame would come and talk to us. And I'm having a very, very wonderful success with many of these young minds and young students who hear me speak and react and send me emails and communicate with me that I've touched their hearts. And this is what it's all about, as far as I'm concerned, making a difference. And when Arthur Miller spoke to us, he demonstrated a scene with two actors, and they did a scene from A View from the Bridge. And I said, then and there, I am going to do that play on Broadway one day. And 30 years later, I did. And not only did I do it on Broadway, I was the first actor ever to do the play as a full-length play on Broadway. And I couldn't have been happier and more proud being with the great playwright Arthur Miller, talking with him, going to dinner with him, walking by the marquee, looking up at the marquee and saying to him, look at that, with our names over the title. And I said, look at that. That's not bad for two kids from Brooklyn. So he and I had a wonderful, wonderful relationship. He was very, very complimentary. He said things like, when you write music and you write a play, the way you wrote it, it's the first time I've ever heard it the way I wrote it. So
that's beautiful.
That was a beautiful thing, and I'm extremely proud of that. In fact, as far as my theatrical career, it is the thing I'm most proud of, is that performance in A View from the Bridge. And the idea that I'm from Brooklyn, a kid just growing up in the streets and having that dream of seeing me doing that play 30 years later and fulfilling that dream. And
you've had a really amazing career because you've been able to bounce back from theater, television, and movies, and you were doing TV and films at a time when you either did one or the other.
Right.
I forgot about this. The Wikipedia printout showed you in Police Story with Don Meredith.
Yeah.
And, that was was based on Joseph Wambaugh book, I think, wasn't it?
That's right. It was a wonderful. We had a wonderful time, Don Meredith. I was his first sort of acting partner or teacher, whatever you want to call it, because he had not acted before. And it was just great with being with him, with his big personality and his fun. He was always fun, as everybody knows who watched him on the Monday Night Football. And he as he said, listen, I'm a gift. That's all. I've been gifted. When I was in high school, they asked me if I could throw a football. He said, sure. He threw a football. Then they said, how'd you like to play college ball? Good. He said, fine. And then he said, how'd you like to play on and then marry the homecoming queen? He said, yeah, fine. And then he said, okay, how about playing a quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys? Okay, fine. So how about being on Monday Night Football? Fine. So he said he's in on a pass.
He had a pretty storied life, I'd have to say.
Yeah, he's a wonder. He was a charming fellow.
Well, another you mentioned another name, and now I didn't even have this in my notes. You've been in a couple of movies that are really let's go to. I mean, one of the most memorable is The French Connection. I could still even remember a line from there. Okay, I didn't do any research on this one. I've just always remembered it. Boca's Scared. You played Sal Boca, correct?
Yes.
Right. I mean, it was a huge breakthrough for Gene Hackman, but I imagine for you as well.
For all of us, Roy Scheider as my partner, my friend, and all of us. It was 5 Academy Awards. Remarkable. It's my second movie. My first movie was The Honeymoon Killers,
which is a cult movie now.
A cult classic, yeah, black and white, beautiful movie. We made it for such little money, and I think we made it for $125,000, and you can't buy a shoe for that. But anyway, and then French Connection. So we have a cult movie, and then the 5 Academy Award French Connection, and then 7 Ups after that, and so on and so forth. But that was a beautiful film. What was the line you remembered?
Boca's scared. You were running a pizzeria with your wife
Yes.
in the movie, and they were secretly videotaping you. Or not video. Well, they didn't have videotape then; they were audio taping you. You were bugged, but that was. And I remember them shooting out at the Westbury Hotel, which I lived around the corner from there, and also a great interview that I read with Billy Friedkin. It's back then they really didn't have a mayor's office for motion picture or anything like that, which now, if you want to, they did a car chase in one of the Bourne Identity films where they shut down 2nd Avenue, were flipping cars over and exploding them. He claimed that they went like on the Triborough Bridge and they just stopped a few cars and they backed everything up, and people that were standing there screaming and yelling in the background, they were actually really furious because the film just stopped the traffic.
Yeah, I guess you would call that stealing some footage.
Yes, which you don't have to do anymore.
No.
But now here's another movie which you and Rod Steiger, because you mentioned Steiger's name, were really impactful, and it's no way a historic film, and probably an embarrassment for Stallone in many ways. He tried to do his Jimmy Hoffa movie, but Steiger played a congressman and you played a mobster, or he played a senator, and you were both great in that.
Yeah, thank you so much. That movie was called Fist.
That's correct.
But it's interesting. People are interesting because after Rocky 1, Sly, who was Sylvester Stallone, Sly they call him, he wanted to show his chops as an actor. So he did the boxing thing, and it was revered and what have you. So he wanted the next movie he wanted to do to show his chops as an actor, in Fist, playing Jimmy Hoffa, and people, because of his success, wanted only to see him as Rocky, and rejected his portrayal of Hoffa putting on a padding, looking heavy, and so on and so forth, in a much more serious movie. But that's really unfortunate, because Sly is a very talented man. He acts, he directs, he writes, he produces. He's
a very good writer, and he writes great villains. He wrote a great villain for you, and I don't know if you were the villain, but you were a heavy in Fist, but you were really good as the head of the. You were the head of the mob, I think, right? Yes.
It's interesting in that film too. My character, Babe Milano, said, because they come to me, Stallone, his character Jimmy Hoffa, was brought to me, Babe Milano in the movie, to do him a favor, you see, and help get him elected. And Milano says to him, "You're going to owe me. You understand that?"
Hey, Tony, I owe you for coming on the show, but I realize we're running out of time. I hadn't even looked at the clock.
Okay.
This was great, but you have to come on again sometime. And I will. I'm going to tweet this out and put this on social media. But thank you so much for joining us. It's always a treat to talk to you. And you've had a legendary career. It's pretty amazing. Keep working.
Okay, pal. Thank you.
Take care,
God bless,
Tony.
everyone.
Okay.
God bless.
Thanks for listening to Stribling's New York. I'm your host, Rob Taub. Thanks for joining us.